What is up, guys? Robert here, bringing you another video for Friday, December 5th, 2025. So let's get started. So, before I begin, I just want to say, if you guys like PlayStation and JRPG news, please do me a favor. I'm on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and don't miss an update for your favorite PlayStation JRPG news. Let me bring that to you guys every single week. So, without further ado, let's get into the first story. This week releases Octopath Traveler 0. Now, there's some mixed reviews about this game. People are saying that it still has that feel of Octopath, same type of game, but it branches away from the overall what you're used to with the 8-character storylines and things like that, and it focuses more on your main hero building, doing your town building and things like that. So, this week, if you are an Octopath Traveler fan, let me know. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, I'm a big fan. I played through the first one. Well, still working on it, but Octopath Traveler, it was one of those games I played on the Switch and I loved it, but my problem is because I play for trophies, I don't go and play too much of the other consoles, so I didn't get to finish it there. And then when the trophies came out for the PS1, I started it and then found out that Octopath Traveler 0 is coming out. So, if you're a fan of Octopath, I think it's a perfect series to get into. They got to change up a little bit of what the feel for Octopath Traveler is, but from reading reviews, watching a little bit of gameplay, it looks fun in my opinion. Haven't played it yet. I'm going to get to it at some point. I think I'm going to finish the first two before I go for this new one, but overall, looks like it's going to be a pretty fun game. But yeah, some people have been playing this game, giving this game mixed reviews, so let me know your thoughts. In our next story, what I think is pretty cool is I am always for DualSense controllers, and Genshin Impact, if you guys know that game, they're releasing a controller that's coming out next year, and it looks pretty cool. I'll put the put the screenshots up, but you should take a look at this design. It looks pretty awesome. I've never played Genshin Impact, but the controller looks pretty cool, and I mean, it's going to be at other retailers, but you can always get this controller at the direct PlayStation store. If you guys don't know, it's direct.playstation, and then you sign in with your PSN ID, and then you can log in and put your credit card up, things like that. But yeah, this Genshin Impact controller, I think it looks pretty cool. One of the probably better looking controllers I've seen in a while. A lot of the controllers that have been coming out recently have been more simple. This one looks pretty cool. So if you are a JRPG fan and you want to get out there and play Genshin Impact with your Genshin Impact controller, I could see this happening. I think it could be something pretty good for the relationship between Sony and Genshin Impact, having more things like this in the future. But looks like a pretty cool controller. And to continue on this JRPG theme, Mark Cerny, he talks about Legend of Dragoon. If you guys have never played, Legend of Dragoon is one of those RPGs that back in the day on the PS1 era, Sony was trying to create this RPG that would challenge Final Fantasy. And the only problem, though, is this came out around the time of Final Fantasy VII. So, people are still on that hype. But Legend of Dragoon it's a really good RPG. Of course, any RPG game you have from the PS1 era has its flaws. But in my opinion, it's a really good game. Your main hero, Dart, that's a pretty funny name for a RPG character. But Mark Cerny says that he doesn't remember it being as good as he can remember it, and how the fans are hyping it up. So one of the quotes that he said was that honestly, he's not tempted to go replay it because it can't be as good as he remembers. He says that nostalgia can, blind one of Sony's finest minds, but you know, a lot of love for Legend Dragoon. Recently they released Legend Dragoon on the PlayStation Plus Classics catalog, and I remember playing through it, a little bit broken here and there, but um, I just don't remember how short that game was. I remember playing it as a kid, and I had my strategy guide, and I'm sitting there playing it, and I'm like looking through it, and I'm like, oh man, this game takes a long time, and I played it as an adult, and much older now, and play through that game. I'm like, game's short, and I don't remember him being that short playing those RPGs, but that's how it is when you're a kid and you become an adult in some of these games. As a kid, you have like infinite time, but as an adult, you don't. But I remember this game going through. So, do you agree with Mark Cerny? Is this game not as good as you remember? Because I think he's losing his mind. Joking, of course, but yeah, I think this game's great. I don't think they'll do a remake or a sequel or anything like that, because the way that the market is for JRPGs right now, I don't think we'll see one anytime soon. And just to briefly update you, Sony has a new patch out, system update. It's system update 25.08-12.40.00. It's just your basic update, security features, stability, things like that. It's a minor update, nothing too serious to worry about, but if you like to keep your system updated, definitely check that out. So, to bring you the next story, the Japanese-only PS5 model hasn't seen success in Japan. Right now, it's getting beat out by the Nintendo Switch 2, but recently they just released the numbers, and this console for last week ended up selling about 17,000 units, and it dropped almost 6,000 units from the previous week. But what do you guys think about this? A Japanese only model, of course, for the Japanese market, but it isn't doing as well. And I think that's right too, because for a couple things. One, I mean, the Switch 2 is just dominating. So of course you're gonna see sales being taken away from PlayStation, but also I think it's a little bit harder in a market. You're making a Japanese only console and you're expecting to sell millions. I don't think it would happen. I think people who have already gotten a PS5 console already aren't really going to buy a Japanese only console to say like, hey, I got a PS5, but already, it's already flooded out in the market. I can pretty much get it anywhere. And it doesn't have to be Japanese only. Like, what are your thoughts? Is it region locked? Are you fans of having it region locked? I wouldn't be. I mean, yeah, I don't play as many, like Japanese games on my account and things like that. But, just the opportunity to be able to play it, I wouldn't want to not have the opportunity to be able to do it. But yeah, 17,000 units sold, and it hasn't been doing as well, but I mean, it's doing better than the Xbox. So joking aside, of course, sales haven't been looking as good compared to their week by week, but it's only last week, so we'll see how it looks this week. And the next story is, do you think that AAA games are kind of at its end? Well, according to the former CEO of Arc Raiders, he believes that to be the case. Now, in this article, he goes on to quote and says this. Let's say you're CEO sitting in the seat running a $23 billion company, and you have to make a decision in a very short period of time to greenlight a project, and if that new project doesn't do well, you're going to explain to the board of directors why you burnt the $300 million in cash. You get one of those mistakes with the board company this size, if you do it again, they're going to be calling openly for your head. And then by the third time, you have an activist investor who runs the publicly game company and the exact situation. So I say it's tricky because what's happening is you're starting to see more AAA development kind of not taking a risk. What you're kind of seeing is a lot of these companies are playing it safe. So you think right now with sequels, for PS5, Spider-Man 2 sequel, Horizon 2, God of War 2. Like right now, those development costs so much, and you're seeing that, those are going to be successful IPs, and they're going to be able to throw money in that and make their money back. So you can see these CEOs being safe and playing it. But as he's saying is, if you're coming up with, let's say you're pitching a Horizon and you've already spent 300 million on development costs getting this game up and ready to go, and you've already spent a few years on this game, like, you're the CEO, you greenlight this project, and now you just wasted 300 million. Like, the board of directors are going to ask you, well, why are you doing, like, you have to explain to them why you just blew through $300 million to develop a game. Like, that's an insane amount of money just to be able to build a game. And then you got to think, like, okay, so they give you a pass, and then you do it again. Like, that's where I could see it playing safe. Now, I think one of the ways, and I think the reason why, yeah, they're playing it safe, but I think what they need to do, though, is they need to develop like a smaller type of AAA game. Now, whatever you want to define AAA as, you can, but I always see them, like, if they're working on the Wolverine, they need to work on a smaller game that they can pitch, because you got to think of, I talked about this in one of my last videos, like, you got to think about the health of your games that you're going to have. Now, I know, and I, jokingly say it, like, this era doesn't have games, but you got to think, because they're playing it too safe, they don't have a new IP that they could bring into the PS6 era to be able to say, like, hey, here's what, this new game that's going to be pretty popular. But, not only Sony, though, but you got to think of these other companies. Square Enix is doing the exact same thing. Like, they're playing it safe on remakes of popular franchises, things like that. You want to see what, like, the Adventures of Elliot or even Octopath Traveler 0 is going to look like in sales, because they took a risk on making something like that. Or, you think of like, why Ubisoft is always making Assassin's Creed. Like, what about a, old school RPG that you want to remake that came out for the PS3, something like that. Or come up with a new IP that can challenge an Arc Raiders or something like that. But yeah, a lot of these companies are playing it safe, and I think that's where you're going to start seeing that trouble, because what are you going to do when you're going to want to build a new IP? Like, you're going to have to be confident that that IP is actually going to hit as you start to develop it. So yeah, I think that some companies are playing it safe because they have to. So JRPG fans out there, again, Yuji Ori is at it again. He's stirring up comments about whether or not there's going to be a Chrono Trigger remake, remaster, something like that. Now, my opinion on it, I don't know, but I do think that they're doing, during this 30th anniversary celebration, kind of like what they do at Final Fantasy IX, celebrate it, kind of be able to push out merch and, things like that. But he goes on to say, he quotes and says that he can't say, you shouldn't ask that, and I'll get told off. So he might have something where they may be in the pipeline of doing it, but it might not be there. I don't think it is, because it's a 30th anniversary celebration. But what are your thoughts on it? If they did give it the Octopath Traveler, kind of polish it up like that, a 2D HD remake and be able to get the characters polished a little bit more. You know, would you want like just a straight remaster, fix it up, do quality of life improvements, or would you want a whole remaster of the game? I'm for just the remastering it, not to remake it. Polish it up, have me play it. Because, like, for me, I have it on my phone for mobile, but I haven't got around to playing it because, I mean, I don't play mobile as much, but I downloaded it because it was cheaper to be able to play, and I've always wanted to get back in the series. Now, I've only played it a small handful of times. I think I beat it like one time, so I'm excited to be able to go back and play it, but I can see this game. I can see this game doing well, but I can also see the trouble that they would have of like remaking or remastering this game, bringing it to a newer audience. I think that is where they would have issues with that, because you got to think how many people are actually out there playing, asking for a Chrono Trigger. And you remember years ago when they were asking about a third kind of in the series. One of the guys who was, I think he was the CEO, I don't quite remember, but he was like, if you buy it, we'll make it, but like, you guys don't buy enough of this franchise. So even though there's like nostalgia and hype on it because of 30th anniversary, I don't see it happening just yet. Now, hopefully they prove me wrong and they release something at like the Game Awards or a showcase or something. But I'd love to see one in a HD 2D remake, kind of like, Octopath Traveler, or what we saw with the Pixel remaster, something like that. On this JRPG heavy news, Suikoden on December 16th is supposed to have a live stream, but they say nothing new's happening. So while they're set to have a live stream, approximately 3 hours, like, what are they going to talk about? Star Leap for 3 hours? Or if there's nothing new, like, I know you want to generate hype and things like that, but like, you had the success of the 1 and 2 remake remaster. Like, when are we going to start seeing the other ones, or even like a continuation? None of this mobile stuff, like the continuation of Suikoden franchise, start getting that going. And especially too, because by the time they remaster like the PS2 era of the games, PS6 is already going to be out, and people are probably already going to be tired of it. They would need to have a Eiyuden Chronicles 2 in order for them to bring out like this next set of remasters. But to me, like, unless they're just like trolling, why would you just have a 3 hour showcase of basically nothing again? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. But I'm a fan of Suikoden, so I'd love to be able to check it out, but I'm also skeptic because I want to see more from more stuff for Suikoden. I love the game. Third one was pretty good, so I'd love to see 3. I think I stopped playing around 4 because it took so long to come out, but I own them on the PS2 somewhere in my collection. But yeah, we need to hear more about Suikoden outside of the mobile game. So next, Sony news. I guess there's backlash for Sony using AI in their advent calendar. Now, typically your advent calendar is like a marketing tool that you use to be able to get surveys done, push product out there, things like that. Like, to me, it's no big deal if you're going to use AI to drum up a little bit of stuff like that. But I think there's this whole issue right now with AI, though. People are not like super excited about AI, especially getting in gaming, because they're trying to basically replace jobs with AI for things that can be done by, a human, of course, writing your scripts, looking at the, finding bugs in your games, things like that. They're going to try to get AI to do all that, and they're going to, hopefully help cut development costs. But you're starting to see that, like, they're starting to try to use AI in development of their games. You're seeing like your NPC characters and things like that are part of AI, so they can run a script and you can tell them exactly when they interact what you want to hear, and things like that. So I think it could get a little bit icy of what they want, but for advent calendar, I don't think it's like a big deal in my opinion. I think it's just something that, hey, you know what, it's easier to push out things like, if you want to send a bunch of postcards, like a digital postcard, there you go. So nothing too bad. Don't have to worry about Sony doing anything crazy with this. It's just a marketing tool, so just be on the lookout. If you want to take a survey or something like that, check out their advent calendar. So for the top story is RAM chips for the PS6. This might become a bigger issue than what we expected, because one of the companies, Micron, who does this, decides that they're going to cease operations overnight of supplying RAM and memory to consumers by the end of February 2026, as it reroutes its supply to AI-driven. Now, earlier, I was just talking about AI-driven products. This is going to be a concern because OpenAI just signed that deal with NVIDIA for 40% of their RAM chips. So we know PS6 is using these RAM chips, and now if OpenAI is taking 40% of them, 60% is going to be for the rest of us who want to be able to use these RAM chips. And I think this is going to get a little bit tricky, because you also got to think too, development of the console. PS5 struggled when it came out in 2020. Now you're going to have a struggle of producing this console. Do you pivot now and figure out a different type of, chip to be able to use, a different model, something cheaper, something more expensive? I don't know. But the quote here is that the AI-driven growth in the data center has led a surge of demand for memory and storage. So Micron has made the difficult decision to exit consumer business in order to improve supply and support for our larger strategic customers in a fast-growing segment. So you can see the concern now, because now it's going to come down who's going to bid the most for these, who's going to be willing to pay the most. I think honestly, like, PS6 has to start coming up with a new development. If they want to use a specific RAM or RAM in general and they have to get chips, you got to start planning out now what it's going to look like, how you're going to get these chips, what you're going to do to be able to, secure your supply going into the next generation to be able to build your PS6. And I think it's going to get a little bit tricky. I can see them coming with a product that's going to be more expensive now, because they can say, oh, there's a chip shortage, so now your console's $1,000 because we can't get these chips in time. But you can also see the PS6 kind of in the development, what we saw with PS3, they can't get them out fast enough, and it's taken years to be able to get, consoles out to the market. So I think there's a little bit of pros and cons for that. I do see it kind of a dicey situation, because you're going to want to, bring up hype for this new console, show your new design, things like that. But you don't want people to be able to say like, oh, like what a lot of people were saying this console generation. The PS5 is just like a upgraded PS4 Pro, if you wanted to call it that. But having something to where it's just like an upgrade. So there's no point now for me to go from a PS4 to my PS5 to now to my PS6 if it's just going to be an upgrade to my PS5. It's just going to be like, Pro squared or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I can see that. Like, if any of you guys watch this video are in kind of the market that produces RAMs or things like that, or even knows or knowledgeable about it, drop it in the comments. Let me know. Like, do you see this as a hurdle going into the next life cycle of consoles, or do you see this as kind of like it's a no big deal? This is how the market is. But I also wonder too, like, is there only a handful of companies who make this specific type of RAM, or is it just like these were the guys who were contract to make it, or they wanted to use, and now they're getting out of that market? Because You know, how easy is it to make? Can another company just come in there and make the RAM super quick of what you need to do, and, you know, things like that. So I'm not big, as you can tell, on the computer scene of things like that, but, you know, it's always, it piques my curiosity to try to understand, like, when you're doing, you know, manufacturing of these things, but you have to plan out your budget, things like that. You have to be able to see how many of these consoles that you can make, and I think it starts now. I think PS6, if it truly is in development, they got the design, how much their parts are going to cost. Like, they need to start looking at it now to determine whether or not they have to pivot to use something else, delay the console, you know, but who knows? So it's gonna be an issue with these RAM shortages, and it's gonna be a pretty interesting next console generation. Do you wonder, though, if these other guys, the Nintendo and the Xbox, are gonna start swooping in there now because you know, their console doesn't rely like on these specific RAMs that they're trying to get, and maybe they've already secured up the RAMs that they want to use. But I don't know. Interesting story to me, and I think that's where we will end it today. I thank you guys so much for watching. You know, speaking of AI, my last video talked about having ChatGPT predict the PlayStation January monthly and lineup. So I thought that would be an interesting video to see kind of what they're going to be able to talk about, whether or not, you know, we'll come back next month and see whether or not ChatGPT did get it correct, or if it's just, you know, are they losing their minds because they're AI, you know, something like that. But just a, you know, cool little fun for that. And also, too, I want to let you guys know I am in a weekly podcast with Dark Knight 316 called the Roundtable Podcast, where we talk about the latest gaming trends, news, like how it should be, from gamers who've been playing games for over 30 years. So come check that out. Give support to that, and be able to, if you know, love listening to podcasts, you can hear my voice ramble on for another hour or so if you want to be able to hear that. But come check that out. Dark Knight, you know, building this channel, pretty cool. Actually got me into wanting to do, you know, bring new segments and things like that because of this roundtable that I just, you know, happen to stumble upon to be able to do. So yeah, check that out. But hey, I appreciate you guys for sticking around this long, for watching. Thank you guys so much. God bless you guys. And remember, keep gaming. Thanks, guys.